Okay, I have some thoughts things that I thought of a few hours ago. This is what I strongly believe in and have been talking about for some years now. And this is the importance of telling stories. First of all, I think we all know that we belong to first global culture. You cannot say that anymore that we do what we want to do in our own country or in our own home, and that's it. Because since we interact with the world either knows us or doesn't know us. And the other thing is that we are all aware, I think, whether consciously or not, that we belong to what we might call a non-mainstream culture. Because the dominant culture in the world is European and American. And since we live in the same world, we visit there, they visit us, we read their books, we hear the news that comes from there, then at some point you ask yourself, but where am I in all this? All this that I read and all the news that comes to me, where do I belong? And so my point of entry into this discussion then is that to stress on the importance of telling our stories. We tell stories first to entertain. That's the most basic function of a story. And you tell a story, you enjoy yourself, other people enjoy the story, and that traditionally, or at least when you were growing up and your grandmother or your mother told the story, that was it. But outside of this entertainment paradigm, there are other reasons, other contexts in which stories become important. The first is that it allows us to express ourselves. And there are so many people, in fact, who say, I want to write a story, I want to write, or I am writing. And that need, because you ask yourself, what's the point? Why are you wasting your time? But people need, some people need, many people need, some can do it, some cannot do it. But there is the need to express oneself. Of course, you can do it via stories, or you can do it other ways, music or painting or whatever. And then, when you tell stories, you will learn about others when you read a story. And you empathize with each other. So you tell a story and people learn about you, you learn about them by reading or hearing their own stories. So this is how we sort of connect with each other as people, because every person in a way is a private person. There's a wall around him or her. And when you express yourself, you somehow go outside that wall and you learn more about someone else or some other people. And if it's a writer, then you learn more about the writer, or at least you learn something that's not only you. It's a very complicated thing, but anyway. And then an important function of a story in the political sense is that we tell others about ourselves. By others, I mean people who do not belong to our culture or to our country or to our community, to our race, whatever. So we tell outsiders about ourselves, about who we are, how we think, why we do certain things, and so on. And we do that all the time since we were children. When I was young, we were reading stories that were written in England, and then later on they were written in the United States or in Russia or wherever. And then, of course, in that kind of a situation, you learn about other cultures. And I remember when I was young, I was just wondering when would I read. I remember it very consciously, and I'm sure a lot of you have also thought about this. When will I read something that's not set in London or in the moors of England or in New York or Los Angeles, but in Dar es Salaam? This place is as exciting as anywhere else. And so I remember as a child thinking about that, and it is a very important question that as we grow older and we feel the need to express ourselves, we try to address. Now, having said this, I think we all agree, more or less, that in this society, of course, there's a lot of telling stories, it's like a Picasso guy, you tell people, a lot of bullshit, But to tell formal stories, that of course has almost, is at, let's say, a very low level of activity. In the early 1960s, when African literature sort of somehow emerged in the world, it was a very exciting period, and it was Achebe and Ngugi and so on. Then I remember even in our own high school, that my headmaster, Peter Palangio, brought Achebe to our school, and he brought other writers from South Africa to our school, and there were writing competitions and there were poetry competitions. And he himself, although he didn't tell us, was a closet writer. So he wrote one novel, Dying in the Sun. So it was that kind of time, but slowly, whatever reason you want to give, unlike Kenya, for example, it has died down. Unlike even Zanzibar, because Zanzibar tells a lot of stories, whether we like it or not. A couple of years ago, I came across an interesting statistic from UNESCO. And I think this tells us in very dramatic form how unequal the cultural exchange in the world is. This statistic was a little old, but I don't think it has changed too much. And it gave the number of books published by different countries in the world. And I looked at Tanzania, it's about 300, maybe 350. Kenya was a little higher, 600, something of that order. And then when you looked at the United States and Great Britain, it was 100,000. So now, that already tells you that something, and of course, many of those 100,000 books, they come here. I went to the Tanganyika Library Service today, and you look at the books, there's one Achebe, there's no Ngugi. There are other people, and then everything else from other countries, whatever some expatriate, some Canadian, brings an Alice Munro, and some American brings a Saul Bellow, and so on. So it's that kind of thing. Whereas the literature books that are published here, or at least that tell our stories, are not there, and this is symptomatic of a global situation, which is, I think, very, very serious. Until about 10 years ago, I remember feeling very frustrated watching television. So you look at the world news and look at the weather map. Now, here, with 10 newspapers and all kinds of exciting things happening, one is not aware of how the world sees us here. But when I'm there, when I live there, until, as I said, 10 years ago, you look at the weather map. The weather map, there was no Africa. Well, Africa was just space. There was no, as if weather didn't exist here, because it was not important. And now, of course, they put it there, but they will put Cape Town and they will put Nairobi, and so on. And I think it's the duty of every person who lives in any society to make themselves felt. And finally, I will just say how I began. I began with a similar situation, as I said, a kind of a feeling that my stories were not told. And especially when I had got a job at the University of Toronto about 30 years ago. And I somehow felt at that point, it was a kind of a moment in my life where I felt that all the stories that I grew up with, that I thought, and other stories that I thought I would learn from my elders, and some historical stories that we learned in the histories, and some that we would find out, and they would all be lost. The generations would die out, other people would forget, and it's as if you're adrift without an anchor in the world, and you don't have, and you have all these memories with you. I remember I could trace every store on Uhuru Street. That was my world. And I thought that world will go away. At that point, since I always enjoyed writing, or at least I liked writing, I made the decision that I will write whatever happens. And so I started writing stories. I told myself that I will imagine a black space, kind of dark space, without light, so you can imagine a blackout. And then one by one, through one story at a time, bring alive the street, Uhuru Street. Story of one person here, one shopkeeper there, one flat there, and so on. So I wrote a collection of stories that were set in Uhuru Street. And for me, that was bringing alive Uhuru Street, which I thought I would otherwise lose. And I guess that's how I began. That for me, writing stories is of course an end in itself. I don't think I could survive if I didn't write. But if I were asked what I accomplished, then I would say I express myself, I create the world in which I grow up, the world to which I still belong, and it's also my contribution to that world, to make its presence felt in the rest of the world. Because as I said, we live in a world where there is interaction, we read about other places, and then we find that in those other places, if you are able to be there and see whether your world exists, it doesn't. What the world knows of Africa is AIDS, war, hunger. And when you come here, you look at all the activity, you wonder what's going on. That is a fact. And I have to tell people, look, when I go to Dar es Salaam, I don't see people dropping dead on the street. The population has increased 4 times, something must be happening. So I guess that's where I want to end. And then, one thing that is very important. In Toronto, then, as I said, you don't see, even now, you might see things fall apart, but that's about it. You will not see other African books. Now you will see Asian books, but when we were in university, if you wanted to read V.S. Naipaul, for example, the bookstore would have to order it. So we thought what we should do is to start our own activity. And we started by founding a literary magazine. And this comes from the same tradition in which we grew up here. I come from the Tegemea generation. You don't wait for others to do it for you, you do it for yourselves. So we thought that there's no representation of us or our culture or our stories here, so we will start our own magazine. Now, I must warn you, if you are thinking about it, it is a very foolhardy kind of activity. It's a mad, only people who are mad would do it, but then, as we know, some of us are already mad. So we started this and we never got out of it. Very often we ask ourselves, why on earth did we get into this? But we did. So then what we did was we registered the organization, and we started asking around who's writing stories, who will write a review and so on. So we collected a group of people from South Asia, from the Caribbean, a few from Africa. In those days there were not many. And we started putting things together to publish, and we did not wait. We put our own money into it. We did our own layout and so on. We learned our own editing, because editing is a very professional activity. So we had a friend who was an editor, and from that we learned how to edit manuscripts. And we just brought out a magazine of 112 pages. And all I can say is the first time you see something that you produce, it's a thrilling experience. But it's something that at least some of us have to start to do it, to start a movement. And when that goes on for a while, then you find that maybe you've made a difference, that there is a growing literary culture, or something is happening, and something new is happening, and new writers are emerging and so on. But it's something that you cannot leave to others to do for you. Some people who are serious about the literary culture would have to would do that kind of activity. Unfortunately, I say this with a little bit of trepidation. In Africa, somehow one gets used to the fact that others will do it for us. That the money will come from somewhere else. That, I think, is a trap, it's a drug that unfortunately has infected this culture, but there are enough people here who can support themselves and do these things. It's not an easy thing to do. I mean, we've had, you sacrifice your own money sometimes, you sacrifice your time, and you sacrifice your personal life, because to do this kind of a thing consumes your life. And you find that even your relationships suffer, but it's a madness, as I said, that some people have, and they do it, but it's not something that you, I think, it's your culture, your life, your soul, your stories that you have to take care of yourself. So we can now have a discussion based on this, and you can ask me questions or ask yourself questions or whatever.